Hey, Curtis, what are we watching this week?
Hey, this week we're watching Universal's Dracula plus Body Heat meets the 1983 TV series Manimal. We're watching Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I didn't see you going there, Manimal. Welcome back, listeners. We're back for another week of Let's Talk About Flicks, the weekly podcast where we visit a theme. We each go back and forth bringing a movie to the theme. I'm one of your hosts, Oz.
And I'm Curtis.
And we are kicking off February with Wife's Choice. February being the month of romance.
Ooh la la.
Day. We our better halves, was an idea from them even that, hey, why don't you let us pick your movies this month? So we did. We went with romance movies for February that our wives picked. So we are kicking off the month with your pick, actually.
Yep, or
your wife's pick.
Melissa's pick, to be more specific.
Pick.
Yes. 1992's Francis Ford Coppola produced and directed Bram Stoker's Dracula. As the listeners might deduce, especially after my next edition or hers in 2 weeks, my wife likes her romance movies to be aggressive. Very aggressive romance movies.
Like borderline torturous.
Yes. Which really, I would say, defines our relationship in a lot of ways.
I was going to say, you wouldn't have to scratch too far below the surface to find what really keeps you guys glued together.
Yeah. Aggressive romance.
Body heat.
Yep.
So we've got Dracula, the classic age-old tale of tortured soul.
Yes.
And
who is a romantic at heart?
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so. I think this definitely it's a perfect entry into definitely our romance month, but also really satisfying. I know one of my favorite aspects of film is the horror genre. I get a vibe that over the years it's become less of a tentpole of your cinema circus, but it definitely is front and center in mine. I do love a good. I won't even say a good horror film. I just love a horror film. I can find interesting qualities and enjoyability in just about all of them. There are a few that I have watched that I just either they're too much for me or just whatever. But I do admire I admire the genre of horror because it gives the vibe that anybody can do it. We have both seen in our upbringings, just great pieces of extremely low budget horror that's very effective, and then you've got something like this, which the budget I didn't even look at, but it doesn't matter because it's all there on screen.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a gorgeous film. It's a very romantic film, and the horror really is secondary, to the storyline. But it's a genre that's always seems to be very successful. It doesn't matter your star power or your budget. If you can deliver a scare, it works. And this happens to have the star power and the budget.
Yeah,
and it's a great film.
I mean, it's a genre film. It's a fancy genre film, but it is a genre film. And then any genre film, you're eliciting some kind of reaction from the audience. With comedy, you want to make people laugh. With horror, you want to make people, you want to scare people, or you want to disturb people, and this
uncomfortable.
Yes, and this movie succeeds in that.
Yeah. But not losing its overall romantic side, which is why it's a selection for this month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tricky balance that Coppola has here. He walks that line between not losing the romance with the horror, or even the other way around as well.
Right. Yeah, you're definitely not turned off of the love story because of the amount of blood in the movie, and there is a lot of it.
Yep. So Oz, who are our characters in Bram Stoker's Dracula?
In Bram Stoker's Dracula, we obviously have Dracula, played by Commissioner Gordon, Gary Oldman. It was funny, we were watching it last night, Jenny and I, and and of course Dracula, and this was early on when he was still an old man makeup. And I go, you know who that actor is, don't you? And she goes, he looks familiar. I go, it's my wife's a huge Friends fan, and I go, that's the actor that Joey, that spit in Joey's face on when they're acting. She goes, oh, okay, really? She goes, I thought it looked like the commissioner in the Batman movies. I'm like, oh,
well, you're not wrong.
I go, same guy. And she goes, oh, okay, I didn't put that together. So yeah, Gary Oldman playing, easily, in my opinion, at least one of his top roles. He's an amazing actor by any right, but I think every actor in their filmography has roles that stick out. Those are the ones that tend to show up in the top of your IMDb. Excuse me, they get the poster art.
Yep.
Under the featured films, and I think this is definitely one of them for him.
And really also for Gary Oldman, kind of kicked off that, he was a leading bad guy for a long time, especially in the 90s.
For a long time.
Dracula.
Sid and Nancy, The Professional.
True Romance.
Yep.
Air Force One.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that Air Force One. But yes, this is, it is. He was excellent in this movie. We also have Mina, played by Winona Ryder. She is the fiance of our next character, Jonathan Harker, played by Keanu Reeves.
Whoa!
But she's also the long lost love incarnate of Dracula. His bride way back 400 years ago of the time of this film. It was Winona Ryder playing another character, but it was his bride that committed suicide when she thought he had been killed. But we'll get to that in the plot. We have Anthony Hopkins playing Van Helsing.
Oh, and he really Van Helsing's the out of this role.
Yes, he does. He I think he chews as much scenery as Dracula eats necks.
Well said.
He's all over it. I did read that it was originally Liam Neeson wanted this role very badly.
Yeah, he was really pining for the role.
Yeah, nice pun there.
Uh-huh.
But Hopkins is coming off of Silence of the Lambs, so basically any script in Hollywood was his. And
Liam Neeson was coming off Darkman.
which
is a fun movie. Darkman's a fun movie,
right.
But in the public eye, Silence of the Lambs is going to win out over Darkman.
Right? Yeah. Liam Neeson had not quite elevated his stature in Hollywood to the point of usurping Anthony Hopkins from a role. So those really are our main four. We also have a series of plot-driven secondary characters. We've got Mina's very wealthy best friend Lucy, who is quite the flatterer, and we have her suitors, Seward, Homewood, and Quincy. And they are integral to the plot in that they are all pining after Lucy's attention. She does accept the proposal from one of them, but really I was impressed with at least the characters of those three still buddied up and stuck together. They easily were romantic rivals and should have hated each other's guts, but I think all three clearly loved Lucy individually to the point that they were willing to put their aside. They wanted her best wishes over any sort of enemy status they should form with each other. And then, bringing up the pack, we've got Renfield, played by Tom Waits, who's just kind of Dracula's guy. He's not an Igor figure.
It's his hype man.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's
Dracula's hype man.
He's his hype man, his wannabe wingman that doesn't ever get a chance to take wing.
Nope. He's there to support Dracula bringing home the girl, but he never brings one home himself.
Right. So that's really it for our characters. We got three Dracula's brides that are just there. They're beautiful in their own right, but really they're just they serve a point in the plot, but not. I mean, they're not. They have no speaking lines or anything. But those really are our cast of characters. One of whom played
by Monica Bellucci.
Oh, Monica Bellucci, beautiful Italian actress.
I will say on that note, there are a lot of beautiful people in this movie.
Yes, there are. Yeah,
a lot of beautiful people.
Yeah. I don't think we've run into this level of top to bottom beauty since Boyfriends of Christmas Past.
Yes, I was thinking about that beforehand. A lot of beautiful people in Hallmark's Boyfriends of Christmas Past.
Right.
And with the exception of Anthony Hopkins in this movie, everybody else is gorgeous.
And Hopkins still gets to make out with Mina.
He does.
End,
yeah,
so.
he does.
Right. And could have had all 3 brides had he given himself up. Mm-hmm. But that's our cast of characters. There we are. So you want to jump into the plot?
Yeah, the plot moving forward. This movie, it has an amazing prologue sequence. Oh, it's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yes, absolutely.
It kind of reminds me a little bit about in Fellowship of the Ring, that great prologue that describes the backstory.
For sure. I could see that.
And the narrative, there's some parallels there with kind of how they told the story. And so we get the backstory of Dracula or Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler.
Right.
Back in Romania, as Constantinople had fallen, and the Muslim Turks were coming up from the far western part of Europe and the Middle East, and he led the forces representing Christianity, fighting off the Muslim Turks. So we get this whole great sequence, of him going off to war. Elisabetta, his wife, as you mentioned before, also played by Winona Ryder, is kind of pleading for him to stay, but he's got a duty. He has duty, and he has to go take care of things. He has the best armor ever.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God.
It reminds. I mean, I'm a big fan of just all red armor. I love it on Dracula in this movie. I love it in the Star Wars universe. Mm-hmm. I even loved it in the movie Beastmaster.
Not Manimal, Beastmaster.
No, right. There's just something about, but yeah, it's so the rigid and
it's like a muscle bodysuit is what it looks like.
It doesn't give you any sort of comfort that it's actually going to stop anything. But man, does he look cool!
Mm-hmm. Not too dissimilar from El Gigante's muscle bodysuit.
Yeah, I think Dracula was the inspiration for El Gigante's.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a good wink to the audience for all of our listeners who are big fans of mid-90s WWF.
Right. If you like wrestle crap, you'll love El Gigante.
Yes. and then by default, Vlad the Impaler's armor from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes.
There's a great through line from one to the other there.
I haven't seen them both in the same place at the same time, so who's to say it's not the same?
Yeah. Little conspiracy theory there.
I think so.
So he goes off to war, and he's just brutal in battle. They literally show people impaled on spikes, thus Vlad the Impaler. They're pushing the Muslim Turks back, and as kind of one last kind of almost figurative stab at Vlad the Impaler, his enemies send a letter to the Vlad Tepes residence, saying that Vlad, I think it was probably Federal Express,
it was probably Sheriff Bart with a candygram.
Candygram for Elisabetta. And this letter, this notification says that he died in battle. So they basically to hit him where it hurts most, in his home and his heart, they inform his wife that he's dead. And before he has a chance to prove otherwise, she throws herself in the river and commits suicide.
As one does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before researching any sort of shred of evidence, that's it.
Yeah.
She was actually, when they brought her body out of the river, she was in miraculously pretty good shape.
Yes.
For the distance of said fall.
Yeah. She had one little thing of blood coming out of the corner of her mouth.
Right.
That's it. Yeah. It's funny for as gory as this movie gets, it was a very PG-13 depiction of her dead body.
Yeah. Exactly. We had to maintain her beauty, but yeah, it's like watching her plummet to those depths into the craggy rocks of the river below, and she just, hurt her gums.
Yeah.
It was a bad flossing incident.
She actually died of gingivitis.
Right. First time flosser.
Oh man, it stings.
Right.
So she's dead, and he comes back, and his minister or whatnot, his chaplain could be a word for it. Also played by Anthony Hopkins, interestingly enough.
Oh, I missed that. That.
And tells him what happened, and sorry, Vlad, but you're never going to be reunited with her, because when you commit suicide in Christianity, your soul does not go to heaven.
Right.
And he just cannot accept that. He absolutely cannot accept that. He renounces the Christian God. He literally stabs his sword into a stone cross,
a blood-filled stone cross.
Yes, it pours out of there, and he drinks this blood, and thus is cursed by the Christian God to become a vampire, to become Dracula. Then we cut to the title card.
Yeah. Which is just, even the title card is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Just, I touch on it later, so I'm not going to get on it now. But just we've watched a lot. I mean, this is episode 14. We've watched a lot of films, but very few of them. And I'm not getting nitpicky here, but I'm going to use like what I would assume would be like Scorsese's opinion between film and cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't feel really we haven't watched any cinema yet. We've watched great films.
Mm-hmm.
We've watched some not so great films, but really they've all just been shot and edited. Like, the closest I would say is probably The Thing, where there was deliberate effect shots, but they also, everything in the effect shots that we've covered so far in movies has been on camera. And that's one of the things I love about this is the off-camera adjustments to special effects, lighting from underneath.
Yeah.
Just reverse projection, or rear projection. Just those cognitive choices in filmmaking are really what separates this from just another run-of-the-mill Dracula movie.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
Well, it's they had a standard special effects team hired for this movie,
mm-hmm.
and when he told them the kind of things he wanted practical effects, he wanted on-camera effects,
right?
Nothing post, like we're doing it all on camera. He fired them when they said that they couldn't do it,
right?
And so he actually put his son Roman in charge of it.
Roman,
yeah, and
who went on to become a director himself.
Yeah, and with one exception, everything in the movie is done on camera. Through camera trickery, lighting, miniatures,
and I touch on that later in my 3-2-1. So
yeah, I'm sure we'll come across that.
Don't steal
it. We'll come across that in the plot as well as in our closing.
Yeah.
So we jump from 1462 to present day in the film 1897 in London. We briefly get introduced to an asylum. Renfield, who was a kind of land procurer. Almost like a fancy real estate agent in a way, worked for a firm. He's in a padded room in this asylum. And it turns out, as we cut to the next scene, which introduces us to Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker, that Renfield and Harker work for the same, I'll just say real estate agent, estate agency. Right. I think it was Century 21.
I think so.
It's what they work for. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Harker's boss informs him that we have this deep-pocketed customer who lives in Romania. He wants to buy several properties in London. We had sent your predecessor Renfield over there, and he came back insane. So we need somebody with a level head who's going to finish this deal for us. And so Harker's like, we get introduced to his fiancée Mina, played by Winona Ryder.
Right.
Who she kind of reluctantly, okay, if you got to go, you got to go. We'll postpone our marriage.
And I got a lot of, I like how they handled the respect of their relationship.
Yeah.
In this situation, both Reeves and Ryder do a good job of, in this relationship, it's Mina that's wanting to push things further, faster, and Harker he's resistant to it. He wants to play it by the book. Is even when he tells her he has to go and they're in the garden and she pulls him to set him down on that bench or whatever, he was ready to be like, well, I have to go, so I'll see you later. And she's like, we need to make out first.
Yeah.
So
I would say, using this word descriptively, he's very kind of romantically conservative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could say, I agree with that, and that it was, and it comes into play as we see later on that she's willing and thirsty for a strong in-person romance.
Yeah, she's much more curious about romance, and there's some desires there that I don't think she's quite realized that have been untapped.
Right. Well, and she's got Lucy too. So. Yeah,
Lucy's who's her best friend, but who's a little more I don't know, amoral, maybe we could put it that way.
A little bit, yeah.
As I was watching this with Melissa, they Harker and Mina share a very passionate goodbye kiss, kind of similar to a kiss that they opened the movie on between Dracula and Elizabeth.
Yes.
The camera kind of pans back to a peacock.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Is another one of those off-camera, effect choices that I just loved it.
Yeah.
You just to give them some privacy, you just drop that little peacock feather right in there.
And the camera kind of focuses in on one of the circles on the peacock's tail feathers, and then it transitions to another scene. but I paused before this very cool transition as I'm typing in my notes, sitting next to Melissa, and I'm just typing what I'm seeing, just observationally. Yeah. And my note says they passionately kiss in front of a peacock. And Melissa's like, you're not going to include that. Like, it's what happened, isn't it? They passionately kissed in front of a peacock.
Well, and what's and you take it a little further, because I've got a deep understanding and knowledge of peacock romance.
Yes.
They bring those feathers out when they are ready to mate, and so that could be another little signal of. The peacock liked what he saw.
Yeah, he did.
Really, and really threw that plumage out there.
Yeah, I mean, like there is the term peacocking. When you're kind of trying to put your best self forward, your most confident self.
Right.
So maybe the peacock was peacocking.
Yeah. Maybe. I think we're on the same level of Coppola here. We get it.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of people probably missed it, but not us.
Anything involving peacocks, we're all about. We see what you did there, Francis.
Yeah, that's right. We got you, Francis.
Francis.
I know you aren't one of mine.
Exactly. I knew you'd pick up on that. So we get a cool transition from the peacock. What are the circles of the peacock's tail feathers? To a train emerging from a tunnel in Romania. So again, the pacing in this movie is great, by the way. It takes just enough time for the characters, but it moves the plot along very well. And again, at this point, you don't need to know a bunch about Mina and Harker. You need to get things forward because the movie's called Bram Stoker's Dracula, not Bram Stoker's Harker.
Right. Well, and I think in this situation, less is more.
Yeah.
Because the little that they've shown us between Harker and Mina demonstrate that while there's romance there, it's still little. Like it hasn't blossomed anything. They're not together. They've never been together.
Yeah. She reveals later they have not had any sexual experiences.
Right. So I think the longer we linger on them, then the more the film has to give us about their romance, and there just isn't there's not any more to give.
Yeah, and the more distant she feels between herself and Harker.
Right.
So we get introduced to some of those amazing effects, as you talked about earlier.
Yes.
Some practical effects. There's just some amazing sequences here, like miniatures of a train. It appears to be kind of going over like the Carpathian Mountains, and there's like a journal that's in the same frame. Go ahead.
There's absolutely no reason for this to not be digital, except for just Coppola to challenge himself to make it practical. It's 92. Special effects are there. They're not at the level they would be today, but Jurassic Park isn't too much later than this.
Yeah, it was just a year later.
The ability to put the effects in digitally are there, that they, and we see several times in the movie superimposing, one piece of film over another, to where there, like you said, not only is it a beautiful shot as it is, but it just ramps it up even more when you find out, like, no, that's all practical. That's a giant book and a model train, and it's not any forced perspective. It's just there,
and it has a
awesome.
physicality that digital effects
absolutely
can never
Right.
completely replicate.
Right.
We get a cool shot of him sitting in the train looking out this giant window in the train, and you see Dracula's eyes in the
Yeah.
skyline behind him. That's where they kind of did like the film on top of film on top of film.
Yep.
And you were introduced to Dracula's voice as Harker reads a letter that Dracula wrote him, and it's narrated by Gary Oldman's Dracula in just the coolest voice and accent.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. He nailed it. I mean, we kind of commented, Hopkins he goes quite a bit over the top.
Yes, he does.
But thankfully, for his benefit, Van Helsing is depicted as an over the top character in this movie. So, Hopkins really brought what he was expected to bring.
Yeah.
But a lot of the voice acting on a lot of the actors was fine. Yeah, it really was. It was fine. But I mean, Oldman's Dracula voice I saw he took like singing lessons so he could learn to drop his voice an octave, and he just nailed it.
Yeah, he does. Harker's looking at it longingly at a picture of Mina, again, because she's played such a pivotal role, especially amongst the three of them. We get to Transylvania. A carriage drops Harker off. Another passenger kind of mysteriously gives him a cross, which he then puts around his neck. We hear wolves howl. A dark carriage arrives, and again, some more camera trickery here.
Right.
As the carriage driver, it appears that his arm reaches out unnaturally beyond the length of his arm to kind of pull Harker in.
Yeah, and he picks him up to pull him in. I mean, Harker, there's no bounce in his step as he's walking to the carriage.
It's very fluid.
Inspector Gadget picked him up and pulled him into the carriage, because I think that's who the carriage driver was.
Either that or Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic.
One of the two.
Yeah.
Either one, Matthew Broderick.
Yeah.
In an uncredited role. Matthew Broderick is Reed Richards.
Yeah. That'd be a very interesting Reed Richards. We get the one optical effects shot in the whole sequence of the whole movie. I do think the same effect comes up later, but there's kind of a blue flame that I know is integral in the novel, which I have never read, but we do see that. So the one sequence in which Coppola bent on his effects rules. Yeah. But
it was like you said, to closely tie into the novel to the original novel. So it wasn't effect shot for effect shot sake. It was Coppola, to stay true to the source material.
Yeah, Coppola did his best to do that. Again, there's a reason why he called it Bram Stoker's Dracula, and not just Dracula. We get introduced to Dracula's castle, as well as then Dracula himself. Welcome to my home. This pale old man with this red kind of Eastern Asian inspired robe. Which I thought was very cool, because it doesn't look like what we would expect in this kind of like Eastern European motif. So
right, especially in that overhead shot where they're walking across the big foyer area of the castle, and he's just got this several foot long train of this dress behind him, and it was just very cool outfit.
We get introduced to some of that rear projection trickery they did with the shadows not matching the movements of the character, like the shadows themselves have their own persona and life and act independently of the character, or in response to the character in a way as well.
Yeah, right.
Because at one point the shadow knocks something over on a table.
Yeah, reaches out and chokes Harker. It tries to choke. I mean, so it's like. You see, it's Dracula's intent is hidden in his shadow.
Yeah. So Dracula serves Harker dinner. Of course, Dracula himself does not dine, because he's already dined.
Yeah, he's eaten.
Yeah.
And he doesn't drink wine.
Yeah. Dracula kind of... Harker listens as Dracula kind of tells his family story, and Harker seems to kind of make light of it, and Dracula, he pounces on him figuratively.
It pulls a sword.
Yeah, it's like you don't make fun of my family's history and my history, and Harker.
It's no laughing matter, as he tells him.
Yeah, Harker begs for forgiveness for offending him, because again, ultimately he's there as a salesman. He's got to close this deal, which they do in the next sequence. They sign the deal. There's a backdrop of London, which Dracula's shadow literally looms over. It literally covers London. And I at this point, I kind of noticed something, that Harker is pretty kind of clueless to what he's gotten himself into.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think he's a very good messenger of, I do what I'm told. I don't bend the rules. I really don't do anything for myself. Like, if there's rules, he's a good rule follower.
Yes.
Go there and get this stuff done. Okay. But you're right. Like, there's nothing painting a picture of comfort in Dracula's castle. But Harker's, like you said, is pretty clueless to any of this going on.
Yeah, the Harker character, there's no spontaneity. As you said, he's a rule follower. He does what he's told, and he's there to do business. And he's not there to look into any of these other unseemly things that are going on, at least not yet.
Yeah, he's like the human embodiment of Emmett Brickowski from the Lego Movie.
Everything is awesome.
Right. I'll follow your rules. I can't think for myself.
So Harker congratulates Dracula
Yeah.
on the purchase of these 10 properties around London. And at this point, Dracula notices the picture of Mina that Harker has carried around with him. And he is interested. He takes note. Everything else stops for Dracula.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Harker again doesn't even pick up what's going on.
Mm-hmm. He does ask Dracula about his past. Was he ever married? And Dracula gets very emotionally vulnerable. He says, "Yes, she died." And he's very kind of weak and available at that moment, at least emotionally, which is something you wouldn't kind of expect, especially from a salesperson there for real estate purposes.
Right.
And then at that point, Dracula asks Harker an interesting question: "Will you stay with me for a month?"
Yeah.
I will not accept no.
Yeah. And it's just so quickly, the internal drive of Dracula has changed. He really didn't shift his outward portrayal of it, but as we find out, like you said, his goal is basically, I want you to stay with me for a month. I'm not accepting no, but the internal mechanism is, I need you here so that I can go to London and
hook up with your wife,
right, and steal your fiance from you. Yeah. But don't worry, I'll leave you in good hands.
6 of them precisely.
Yeah. 6. So, but yeah, go ahead.
So at this point, we are introduced to Lucy. We cut back to London, and Mina is staying with Lucy at her home, her very palatial home.
Yes.
Lucy comes from a family of wealth, and Lucy is very aware of that wealth and is not afraid to downplay it.
No, not at all. And it's hard to gauge the age of people because they did use fairly young actors to play the young, but she's still very. And I think a lot of it's because of her wealth. She's still very juvenile in how she acts and holds herself, but despite being surrounded by adult men.
Yes, yeah, very very kind of naive to the world, I would say. So Lucy kind of baits Mina a little bit, with talk that marriage is for carnal pleasure. They look through the Arabian Nights books, which depicts different like sexual positions and other things of that nature, and they kind of talk about that. And Mina is curious. Mm-hmm. It's clearly isn't something that Jonathan and I have ever have ever done, have ever shared, and she's curious about things. Lucy is a little more obvious, with her desire for
I did that last night in my dreams.
We are then introduced a little later on in the evening to the 3 suitors that you mentioned earlier during our character rundown. We have Quincy Morris, who is a rich Texan, played by Billy Campbell.
And a full-blown stereotypical Texan.
A big Bowie knife.
Right. Like, even just, everything he says out of his mouth is deep from the heart of Texas.
I think he's doing his best Yosemite Sam.
Very much so.
Where we see Richard E. Grant's character, Dr. Jack Seward, who's probably kind of the meekest of the 3.
Yeah.
He's more of a man of science.
But he's also the one that's easily the most integral to this I won't call it a subplot in the movie, but this this act of
Yeah.
He's important. I'd say he's easily more important than the other two.
Yes, he has more consequence as far as
Yeah.
his connections and kind of how his character introduces other plot elements. But yeah, he's the meekest of the three. He runs the asylum. He's also Mina and Lucy's personal physician.
Right.
Then we see Arthur Holmwood, played by Wesley Cary Elwes.
Right. The stable boy.
Yes, as you wish.
This is before he was chained up in a dilapidated bathroom.
Yeah, yes. And just saw off his own body parts.
And before he was a tornado chaser.
that too, yeah.
A little before that.
So Mina is kind of self-narrating, and she admits that Harker is kind of more traditional of a persona.
Right.
Especially seeing these other three men who are a little more, I guess, kind of out there with their personas.
Yeah, a little more robust in their personalities.
Yeah, especially Holmwood and Quincy Morris.
Yeah.
We see Dracula's shadow kind of come into play here. Reaches a hand to Mina as we get a peek into Dracula, kind of cutting back and forth between there, and he almost appears to whisper. So this is kind of the first inclination of a connection between the two, and that Mina is responding to this connection. In the asylum, we see Dr. Jack Seward, again played by Richard E. Grant, who was most recently in the Loki series. He played classic Loki.
I haven't seen all of it yet.
Oh, it's great.
I know.
It's great.
I just haven't gotten to it.
Oh, and he is amazing as like classic, old school, like Silver Age comic book Loki.
I'll definitely have to put in the time. I just haven't gotten to it. Ozark just started season 4, so we're watching Ozark.
I'll buy that for now. We get some more Renfield things. He's kind of portending what's to come.
Right.
He's back from Transylvania. He talks about a bloodlust that he used to be a gentleman, but he's clearly not anymore. I also love in the scenes in the asylum. The guards have like milk crate cages.
Yeah, they're like one of the 13 ghosts in that real crappy Matthew Lillard remake.
Yeah,
of like the Juggernaut. But yeah, they do. They just have these giant like protective cages on their heads.
Mm-hmm. And you almost have to wonder what led to these cages in the first place. Like what have they endured that gave the decision to wear these like milk crates on their head? I think that might be my next Halloween costume.
There you go. Just wonder, like, they've got like that, so many days since a workplace incident, like slip board.
Back to zero, fellas.
Start tomorrow, we're wearing these crates on our head.
Because that's mental health.
Right.
And that's the dignity with which people with mental health issues should be treated.
Yep.
We're back at Dracula's castle again. There's a lot of kind of cutting around from scene to scene, so pardon me if my transitions aren't too smooth there. We're back at Dracula's castle 5 days later, and Harker's writing in his journal, and he's finally starting to realize something's up.
Yeah.
He's kind of creeped out when Dracula looked at the picture of Mina, and then we get the sequence where he's shaving his neck, Oz.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, as I do. Maybe not you. You don't look like you shave as often as I do.
Once a year is good for me.
But he's looking at himself in the mirror, and of course, I think everybody probably knows at this point, vampires don't cast a reflection, and so Dracula, and I love it because he's shaving in the mirror, and Dracula's reaches in and taps him on the shoulder enough to startle him. And he cuts himself on the neck, but then when Harker turns around, Dracula's way back at the door. So
he's on the other side of the room.
Yeah, nothing works as intended in Dracula's essence. If you're in his castle or around him, things just don't operate the way they're supposed to.
Reality and physics bends to his will.
And so he's cut his neck, and the Dracula comes up and notices he's cut his neck, and Harker recognizes very quickly, almost, that Dracula doesn't cast a reflection. Dracula kind of covers his face, and of course the glass shatters, and so now Harker can't finish shaving himself. He can't see his, because it takes a real idiot to not know where your neck is.
Oh, call me Mr. Butterfingers.
Well, emo Phillips action there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Dracula takes a straight razor, and he, first he whips away real quick and licks. It's just a really disgusting but yet beautifully shot, quick just quick shot of him just licking the blood off the straight razor. Because he is Dracula, obviously, and then he goes in and he finishes, shaving Harker for him, but you just sit there, like he's completely under Dracula's, power now, not in the mental capacity, but it's like he's holding a straight razor to your neck, like he could end this for you in a heartbeat, but of course he doesn't. Instead he pulls the old Beauty and the Beast switcheroo in a letter of, I have to go, and don't go to this part of the castle.
Yeah.
Don't do it. So which, someone of the intelligence of Jonathan Harker is like, well, I better check it out.
But I will note before that, Dracula also noticed that cross that was given to Harker.
Yeah, right.
And there's a great little line in there, which... do not put such faith in trinkets of deceit, which again just demonstrates Dracula's just utter contempt for the Christian God.
Yeah, he's done.
And because that's when it all boils down to it, that's where the real rivalry is in the movie. Mm-hmm. It's between Dracula and the Christian God, who's taken away his wife's soul.
Right. And all Christian God had to do was be like, I get it. Sorry, man.
Sorry, brah.
You can have her soul back, brah. As he's wearing a visor upside down.
Sorry, brah.
That's the Christian God for you.
Yep. Yeah. If it's not obvious, Az and I both work at high school, so.
and so, but yeah. So you're right. He just don't put your faith in this stuff. It's not worth it. But yeah, then he lets him know via letter, despite being in the same castle.
Yeah.
leaves him a letter. I got to go to London. Got to take care of some stuff. Don't go in that part of the castle.
Which Harker then does.
All right. Of course he does. I better, and he traipses in there and he finds just a beautiful bed. Probably, if the camera to pan back a little bit, there probably was a slot to put a quarter in to make it all wiggle.
But
they didn't
magic fingers.
They didn't put a quarter in the bed. However, there was plenty in the bed already for him. Deep in the covers, deep in the mattress. So Harker then is lunged upon by the three brides of Dracula who come at him in the nude. And again, we've established in our conversation, as the movie's established as well, Harker's never been he's never rounded first base before. Like,
no,
this is all, he's not dumb to how a woman is put together, but he's never been physically present for what's underneath. And he's getting it.
Harker's like young Curtis. He's just like, I'm aware of the female form,
right?
Like, but what do I do with it? Like,
right. And so here's Harker with Monica Bellucci and a couple other of beautiful nude vampires that are like, we'll show you what to do with this. And
they quickly school him in the ways of love.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Was it at this point, or was it later that Dracula enters?
Yeah, Dracula does enter towards the end of the scene.
He hadn't left yet.
Yeah, and he basically tells him back off.
Oh, right. That door flies open, and they get the vibe real quick that
Yeah. Yeah, and Jonathan, he's essentially freaking out because his body is sending him mixed message. He's both terrified and
aroused.
And so he doesn't know what to do.
Right.
But he knows it's not good.
Well, and as the old saying goes, the blood can only go one way at a time. So he can't think clearly. The blood is elsewhere.
I have no idea what you're implying there, Oz. Nor does young Curtis. So the next day, Dracula's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan's kind of watching as these gypsies are filling up these coffins with dirt, and he's not sure why.
Right.
So back at Lucy runs up to Mina, and I love him. She's decided on Homewood. She's decided on Wesley.
Yeah, right.
as the suitor.
Yeah. But the other two hang around, like
yeah, they don't go anyplace. They're just they're there for the ride, whatever.
And they respect the decision, like they're so smitten with her that
there is like a cool brotherhood.
There really is
amongst these three. Like they become like pseudo brothers.
They really do.
They become like bros. They're bros.
The bras.
The bra.
It's my bra.
We get another cool sequence of like dark clouds rolling in Dracula's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Lucy and Mina kind of have like literal chills, like shivers go down their spines, and we're then on a boat, and it's being between Romania and London in the Mediterranean Sea, and the captain's logging about some experimental soil that's bound for London, and sailors are going missing. I think there might be something on board with us, Az.
Might be.
I wonder what that could be.
A Yeti.
It's probably Romania's known for Yetis.
Right.
They're everywhere.
Probably all just seasick.
Yep.
They
don't like the water.
They all got letters that their husband had died in the Turkish War, so they just hopped overboard. It's been effective once in this movie. It just keeps working on all the crewmen of the ship.
So business really picks up in the movie once the ship gets to London, and you kind of see something jump off. There's shots of a zoo, like a wolf escapes from a zoo. And then we get the first of those kind of predator sequences where Dracula has transformed himself into an animal hybrid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, for lack of a better formality, he's a werewolf now, which, werewolves, they're obviously, depending on which line of folklore you listen to, werewolves and vampires are opposites. They're not opposites, but they're different. Whether your folklore be the classics or your Twilight, werewolves and vampires are not the same thing. But there is a thread of literary history that says that werewolves are what vampires can turn into. And so that's really the best visual perception, if you haven't seen the movie, that we could give you, is he's very wolf form here, very werewolfian.
And I am not well schooled enough to know how these sequences were shot. They're cranking the speed of the film. They might even be like kind of removing frames to make it look like he's moving faster.
Yeah, typically would film it at a lower shutter speed. Your traditional shutter speed is about 24 frames a second, 23.98 frames a second. And so if you shoot faster than that, say 60 frames a second, everything has to play back at your 24 to 30 frames a second. So you ramp it up to 60, play it in 24, everything looks slower. So this is probably a longer shutter speed in terms of, 12 frames a second. And then when it's played back, it does give that speed to it, but it's an organic speed. You're not chopping out frames. It's literally just processing it faster. And so that's what I was getting when I was watching this part. Was I'm like, they probably shot the film slower so that when they played it in normal playback, it would speed him up, but everything still looks fluid, but still just kind of sped up and jerky.
But it gives this very unnatural vibe as to how he moves, what he sees, how he perceives the world around him. Lucy is taken by something.
Yeah.
So from inside the house, and she goes outside wearing this very flowing dress.
Yeah. It's very just fantastical, like
very
like Hammer horror, really.
Yeah, fantasy-esque. Mina goes after Lucy, like, what are you doing? Like, it's storming outside, and she comes across Dracula as this kind of hybrid wolf man having pretty graphic sex with Lucy in this garden.
Right. Yeah, it's graphic, is to say the least. Like, it's not it's not like, I wouldn't go as far to call it like disturbing, because there are obviously much more graphic, disturbing depictions of sex on film and other movies. But this is just, it's very creature attacking, but in a sensual way.
Mm-hmm. Dracula telepathically removes himself from her mind, so Mina doesn't. She can't quite put together what happened. She just knows that Lucy was in some kind of trance. Lucy herself even says that she felt like her soul left her body and she was lured out.
Dracula's that good in bed. He's he's amazing.
So good you don't even remember it.
No.
I think that's the definition of trauma, but that's for our other podcast.
Well, look at how they've handled mental illness already in the movie. So,
yeah. So the next day, they're kind of trying to make sense of what happened, and Dracula's moving in. He's moving into these properties in London. These coffins filled with Transylvanian soil are there, including in a property that's literally right next to the asylum, right next to Seward's asylum, where Renfield is being kept.
Is that Carfax Abbey? Is that the...
Yes, yeah. Carfax Abbey. Good memory there. We get some narration that Dracula can go out during the daytime. Mm-hmm. So contrary to some other depictions of vampires, he can go out in the day, but he's not as powerful.
Right. Like, the only others that I know can go out in the day are Edward Cullen and Blade.
Yeah, the Daywalker.
Right. That's it. You've got this Dracula, Edward Cullen, and Blade. And Jim Carrey in Once Bitten. He can go out during the day. That's it for vampire lore.
Who could forget Jim Carrey in Once Bitten?
And you put those four in a movie together, you've got What We Do in the Shadows. So
there you go. This is the first time in the movie where we see the Gary Oldman as Gary Oldman version of Dracula.
Right.
And he is shirtless and hunky. Woo.
Yes, he is.
Young Gary Oldman.
Younger Gary Oldman. It's not like he's he's not like a preteen boy. This isn't young Gary Oldman in the same way that we were talking about young Curtis.
No. There's some minor differences there.
This is an older version of young Gary Oldman.
Yes. Young Curtis and old Curtis were never hunky either.
Melissa would argue that.
Yeah, I guess there might be one person who would say that's contrary, but Dracula is now walking around the streets of London.
Yeah.
And he's kind of in a daze until he sees Mina, and his senses calm. Right.
I think it's important to note here that late 1800s London clearly must be much smaller than modern day London. It cracks me up how quickly everybody runs into each other in London, England.
Millions of people.
Yeah. It's not like even my town of 2,600 people. I can't just bump into people I expect to see at any given moment. But he just runs into her like, oh, hey, there's Mina, right on schedule.
They meet each other, and she sees him and is kind of taken aback by him. You can tell she's kind of piecing together like something's. What is it about this guy?
Right, something's familiar, and I don't know what.
We're back at Lucy's now, because again, jumping from scene to scene. She's getting fitted for a wedding dress, because she's going to get married to Holmwood.
Yep, they're getting married.
Getting married to Wesley.
Right.
Seward walks in, and because he's her personal doctor also, and he's like, something's going on with you. Your senses are becoming enhanced. Mm-hmm. Something's not right here. We really need...
You're very aggressive.
Yeah.
Even more so than Lucy was anyway. Like, she's just very sensual and aggressive.
Yeah. Her demeanor has changed. Her psychological makeup has changed. And so they inject her with something. And Morris and Holmwood are there, and they're all worried about Lucy. Because even, again, as we said before, these three have kind of formed this brotherhood. So they're all there for each other and for Lucy. And Seward's worried. I don't know what's going on, so I'm going to call in my mentor, a metaphysician and philosopher known as Dr. Van Helsing.
Right, yeah, for sure. And, just quick, I think it's important that, while Francis Ford Coppola has made, just in my opinion, a beautiful rendition of Dracula, in a very Gothic style, touching base on, prior cinema, etc., I think it's important that it is 1992. And I really think the trio of Seward, Homewood, and Quincy are what led to the adoption of the phrase "bros before hoes." I think that stemmed from this movie, because their brotherhood is definitely, what it's the glue that keeps them together. So this is
I think Francis Ford Coppola would be in awe that knowing that phrase was traced back to this movie.
I think
that's the kind of cultural impact.
Right. Everybody already knew Dracula, so you weren't getting anything new out of that story. But I really think the underlying tone was Coppola was really hoping to put forth that bros do come before hoes.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure watching this movie is a part of the initiation in all college fraternities.
I was never in a fraternity, but I have.
Nor was I.
I have heard that is true.
Yeah, and everybody knows frat boys are big Coppola fans.
Right. Yeah, they're shallow on the surface, but they're deep. Mm-hmm. They are deep. Right. They don't. They love Jimi Hendrix. They hear Jimmy. They don't just listen to Jimi Hendrix.
I can see the music, bro. We get some other cool effects there in camera shots with Lucy on the bed, and you see the bite marks on her neck.
Yeah.
So you see the classic vampire bite marks. We now go back to daytime Dracula and Mina at the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
And we have them continuing to talk with each other. At this point, she has apologized for kind of being rude to him earlier. Because again, there's something there. There's something that is keeping her engaged in conversation with him.
It's probably that penetrating stare that he just gives her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he pulls her into another room, and she says she knows him. Something's up. How do I know you? Why do I feel so connected with you? And we get one of the classic lines from this movie that I butchered at the end of last week's episode, trying to entice our listeners here, and it was, "I have crossed oceans of time to find you."
Yeah, I read that.
I blush just reading that.
I know it's such. Like, kudos to whoever wrote that line. I haven't read all of Dracula the novel either, so I'm not sure if it's in there. But like, wow, like that's heavy stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't, even if Mina didn't know him, she'd be like, oh, okay.
And it's both literal and figurative as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He went the entire length of the Mediterranean Sea and then up through the Atlantic Ocean, as well as waiting almost 400 years.
Right. And so it's very impressive. I read in the trivia that one of the main reasons why Gary Oldman took this part was because he wanted to know what it felt like to say that line to somebody. And I'm like, might as well get paid for it, because nobody was going to stop you from saying it to your wife anyway. It's like, you just said it. It's not like we got the copyright, please break it down. They're like, you could have said it, Gary.
Yeah, Gary.
Might as well get paid for it, though.
His eyes go red, and he almost bites her. Fangs emerge.
Oh, yeah. He was ready.
But he stopped himself.
Right.
Because that's not how he wants to express his love to this woman that he's waited almost 400 years for.
Right.
Let's see. We've got... I'm just kind of catching up
here. I think
here.
This is the point where Harker sent he sends her a letter.
Yes.
That he's going to he's trying to get out. He hasn't sent a letter yet. We hear kind of a voiceover that he's trying to escape the clutches of Dracula's brides. They keep feasting on him, but they aren't turning him. And so he's got a plan that as they sleep, he's going to try to sneak out through the window and basically jump into the river, because he needs to get free. He needs to get word to Mina that she's not safe. And so he does. We see a scene where he slips out of the castle. He kind of slips down the wall and plunges into the river. Swims the length of whatever river he fell into, but he ends up in a nunnery. He ends up finding a convent. They take him in. He brings him back to strength, and he writes a letter to Mina, knowing he knows now that she's not safe. And he sends a letter to her that I'm in Romania. I need you to come to Romania so that we can get married. We need to do it. We need to get married. And so that letter is kind of obviously it doesn't come at the exact moment they're sitting at the cinema, but it snaps her out of this trance Dracula has placed on her. And so she does. She goes to Lucy. I've heard, she's radiant now. Lucy is still enough Lucy to tap into it. And she's like, I've heard from Jonathan. I'm going to Romania. We're going to get married. And so, and that's what she does. She leaves a letter for Dracula saying, that I'm never going to see you again. And so while that's going on in our main plot, we've got the subplot of, Van Helsing is, he's giving this speech, very Young Frankenstein-esque.
Yeah.
He's giving his he's talking about syphilis and other venereal diseases.
He makes a hilarious joke about STDs.
Yes, he does.
Civilization and syphilization.
Right. And so they all knock on their on their desk to
hurry up.
And so, but yeah, he shows up, and really, Seward wasn't sure he was going to. He wrote him a letter. We need your help, and he shows up, and he's like, when my friends ask for me to show up, I show up, and so this is where we kind of get the overview of the parallel stories of Van Helsing with Lucy as a patient to discover what's wrong. While Dracula has lost Mina again, she's now headed back to Romania, of all places, and now he's in London without her. And he weeps tears onto the letter, and it's they splash purple. He's you feel bad for him. He's such a romantic figure, and there's one person that he's waited forever for, and he just can't. It's like it's not intended to be. It's just not meant to be.
So while all that is going on, back at Lucy's, so I think before Dracula had kind of realized what was going on with Mina, so he's stalking the grounds again. We get those same cool camera shots. Yeah. Van Helsing and the three bros.
Yeah.
are kind of taking care of Lucy. They decide they need to do a blood transfusion with Homewood. She needs new blood.
Yeah.
Something is up with her blood.
Right.
And Van Helsing sees the bite marks, and his wheels kind of start turning here. Like, what's going on? So they put some garlic around her neck. Lucy gets angry. I can't breathe.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. She lures Morris in. She almost bites him.
Right. Yeah, she's ready to vamp out.
Yeah, she is. And she let's see, Van Helsing sees the fangs and he whispers, "Nosferatu." Yeah,
he's the jig is up.
Yeah. And you kind of get some insight on his background as well. So he is aware of these things called vampires.
Right.
The candles get blown out. Seward leaves with Van Helsing because Van Helsing's hungry.
That's right.
He's hungry.
Feast. We must feast.
Yeah, so he and Seward leave, despite the fact that they know Lucy's in danger.
Right.
So
yeah,
half of the party leaves.
Little head scratcher here.
Yeah, half the party leaves, leaving only Morris and Holmwood, who's already out of it because of this blood transfusion, to protect Lucy. The wolf Dracula comes back, stalks the grounds, brutally kills a servant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is very, like, Sam Raimi-esque.
Yes.
Like, just very quick cuts. And, yeah, Evil Dead, Spider-Man 2, it was very much that style of filmmaking in essence here.
Yeah. And Dracula's, he is beyond himself at this point because he is aware that Mina has left. We kind of get some juxtaposed shots between the marriage in Romania between Harker and Mina, and Dracula stalking the grounds.
Where Keanu and Winona actually got married unwittingly.
Yeah, I read that as well. That it was so authentic that they may have been legally married.
Yeah, they're church married. They're not turn your papers into the courthouse married.
Yes.
and they're both cool with it, which I think is so cool. Like, even to this day, they're like, like I read that like she'll call him whatever and just be like, hey husband, and they're both just like, it happened. We're not like legally married, but we were
married in the eyes of God.
We were married in a church in front of a real religious figure. So yeah, I guess we're husband and wife now. And I think their personalities probably could handle that. Like, I could see other Hollywood people just denying that, but I'm like, these two are both just eccentric enough that I think they're like, yeah, it's just part of what happened. It's fine.
So Dracula he's frustrated. He's angry. He's lovelorn, and he knocks out Morris, takes out Holmwood, and he attacks Lucy. And he has not fully turned her before.
No.
And now he does, and he's mad, and we get a blood flood. We got we got a Shining-esque, Evil Dead 2-esque blood flood.
Right,
in
we
Lucy's
we get a Johnny Depp's bed in Nightmare on Elm Street level blood flood here, for sure. But like you said, he hasn't fully turned Lucy, but he's given her enough that she's growing into a vampire. But here he kills her. Like, you're done. I've made you the full undead now. And so she's, porcelain white. He's drained, well, we saw the blood flood. He's drained the blood from her. And she's a goner.
Yeah, I'll say that before we move on to the next scene, because again, we're juxtaposing the shots between Romania and London. So the blood flood's going on, and it cuts to Mina and Harker sharing what could be one of the most awkward open mouth kisses I've ever seen on camera.
Yeah,
it looks like if you were like holding a dog dish at like a 90-degree angle and like lapping at the water from the dog dish, it looked like they were lapping at each other.
Yes, to be fair, he's never kissed someone before.
That's true.
Well, no. They kissed on the bench before he left, right in front of the peacock.
But I mean, they've never kissed each other without a peacock around.
Right. Yeah. He's never kissed anybody as a husband. So.
Yeah. Where's my comfort peacock?
Right. People. That's probably why the peacock was there. So Coppola's like, these two do not know how to kiss. We got to cover this up somehow.
Where's my animal companion peacock?
Right. It's just that Keanu was just uncomfortable.
Yeah, so he just lapped at her for a while. You may now lap your bride. Ow. So we see Lucy is, as you said, porcelain white in a white dress. She's in a glass casket, and everyone's sad.
Yeah.
Van Helsing, I don't know if Van Helsing's sad. He's just kind of there.
Yeah,
he's kind of a jerk.
He really is. Yeah. So but he's also, I think he's also suspicious that we're not done.
He's a pragmatist. He is very much a pragmatist. There's no sensitivity.
Yeah. This isn't this easy.
But
yeah, you're absolutely right. Like he's very flippant in what they do to Lucy coming up.
They're at like the funeral or wake or what. They're mourning her in this casket, and he turns to Seward and says, "We're gonna need surgical knives later because I just want to cut off her head, take out her heart."
You got right. Oh, is it? Yeah. It was like. Yeah, because Seward had asked, "Do you need him for embalming purpose?" Something legit.
Yeah.
Oh no, I want to cut off her head and pull out her heart.
They got her heart. Hilarious.
Tony
Van Helsing. He should be in front of a brick background, like he's doing a stand-up set.
With a spotlight on him. Stop me if you've heard this before.
We need like the Seinfeld music.
Right. It's very Yakov Smirnoff.
Oh, that cheeky Van Helsing.
Right. And so that's what they do.
They go down to her crypt.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's maybe a day later or so.
Right.
And
yeah.
Van Helsing and then the three bros.
They open her crypt and it's empty.
Yep, she's not there.
No, and I think Van Helsing anticipated that.
She's Nosferatu. She's vampire.
But luckily, down the steps she comes with the child. She's gonna feast. She's bringing back her meal, his carry out.
Literal carry out.
Right. She ordered in. And so she goes.
I think DoorDash must have delivered that kid.
Probably. And so she bring, and it's of this whole scene, the part that probably bothered me the most was when she gets to the foot of the stairs of the crypt and she sees them all in there and then just drops the child.
She drops the kid. Yeah. I was a little weirded out by that too. You and I are both dads, and I'm like, whoa,
right,
you don't drop the kid.
And just thud, like you hear the kid thud on the ground, just drops the child. You know, and then it's time. Like she kind of vamps out a little bit. They don't really know what to do. Van Helsing steps in and just this very cool reverse shot of her crawling back into her crypt, back into her tomb as he's holding.
He's holding a big cross.
He's holding a cross to her, and he's spouting out, the power of Christ compels you, and all the things that one would spout. And she does. It was really cool. Just reverse film of her crawling back into the crypt. It's very creepy looking. In which he hands a stake to Homewood, and a moment of courage, and drives a stake into her heart and
into his fiance's heart,
and then lops her head off.
Yeah, and we get another great cut to scene.
Oh, I love it.
We cut to Lucy's bloody head flying through the air,
right,
to a big juicy roast.
Right, yeah.
As Van Helsing, Mina, and Harker, the three of them are at dinner together. Another scene of Van Helsing just, I'm hungry.
Gotta eat.
And he's eating.
Yeah,
he's eating that meat. It's like a hungry man, like a stereotypical hungry man at Ponderosa.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah,
he went to
the
Sizzler.
old 96er sitting in front of him. And so
I think he got a free T-shirt when he was done.
I think he did. He finished. He got the gristle.
Yeah, that ain't the last bite.
And so. Mina asks him, what happened to Lucy? And he's like, I chopped off her head. Just very flippant, and then Keanu Reeves, doctor.
Which, by the way, I don't think we've talked about, and we don't have to go on this long, but like the Keanu Reeves' accent in this movie.
Oh. What accent? Like,
yes.
You can't place it, folks. It's not of any. It's not of any historical nor geographical significance. It's just
there's no origin to his accent.
It's Keanu, try your best.
Yes,
but like even Coppola said, basically he wanted a young, hot actor, somebody who would be in Teen Beat magazine at the time for this role, and it was Keanu Reeves. So here you go. I don't think he wasn't asking much of him.
I did also read that Johnny Depp was kind of Coppola's preferred choice for the role, but the studio, kind of insisted on Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, I read that.
I think Reeves seems to kind of regret taking the role because he was kind of burned out.
Yeah, I saw that too. That he had shot a lot of things in between accepting this role and actually the start of filming. He had worked a lot in between and was just really burnt out.
Well, I imagine Point Break took a lot out of him. I mean, that
right, yeah,
surfing and football throwing.
Well, yeah,
Johnny Utah.
I've never been an FBI agent, but I can assume pulling double duty and trying to keep up with the acting chops of a Patrick Swayze would be very difficult to do.
I'm getting tired and exhausted just listening to it.
Right. So, but yeah, they didn't ask much of Keanu, and he delivered.
Yeah. They set a low bar, and that's what he brought to the table.
I got you covered. Don't you worry.
And Winona Ryder's accent is not much better either.
Well, and I read too, that she was surprised to even be offered this role. Originally, she was offered the role in Godfather 3 of Sofia Coppola's role. Mm-hmm. But she also had shot a bunch of stuff in the meantime, Mermaids and other things, where she was just exhausted. And so she left the set, and when Coppola reached out to her for this, she was really surprised, as she thought that I was done working with Francis Ford Coppola. I didn't think he was ever going to give me a shot because of what happened in Godfather 3. And I think after Godfather 3 came out, Francis Ford Coppola probably watched the movie and thought, "Yeah, I shouldn't have had my daughter."
I shouldn't have used her.
Yeah, I crapped the bed on this one. And so, but and they were fine. Really, this movie is not about Mina and Jonathan Harker. This movie is about Gary Oldman as Dracula, and really Van Helsing as Hopkins. and who can I will say overact the most, but who can bring the most to their role. And so they're pawns in this movie of getting the plot going forward, and it works. I mean, that's really all they are in the novel as well. Yeah. Is they're there to set the stage for the romantic triangle.
So while they're having dinner, Harker kind of reveals, "Oh, I know the property that he bought, so I know where we can probably find him."
Yeah.
And so Harker, Van Helsing, and the three bros prepare, and Mina prepare to assault Dracula at the Carfax Abbey property. Let's see. Seward takes Mina to his asylum because he has quarters there. Stay here, be safe, and then we'll leave you alone because nothing bad can happen now.
Totally fine. You'll be totally fine in my chambers of the asylum.
Renfield, of all people, kind of warns her about what's coming. Jumping ahead a little bit, Dracula catches wind of that, and he takes care of Renfield.
Yeah.
You don't rat me out.
No, and another cool you got this green mist that's all practical. It's just really cool watching it. It's Dracula taking yet another form. Yeah, because when the bros and Harker and Van Helsing get to Carfax Abbey and they're going to basically destroy all these boxes, destroy the dirt. We've got Dracula's there. He's perched in bat form up above. And so he's because he's in his residence, it's like he's fine because it's his home away from home, and so he's there watching them do all this. And like you said, that is when he shifts into a gaseous form and heads over and takes care of Renfield. And then I'll let you go on with Mina.
So I always wondered, why did they decide to do that at night?
Because they're idiots. I mean, they really. I mean, you're right though. Why would you?
Van Helsing had a full belly. Right. Apparently, he could only work with a full stomach. So I got a belly full of meat. Let's go hunt a vampire.
Yeah, the choice of because Van Helsing knows enough about vampires, so maybe he just didn't. I mean, maybe he didn't know all that.
He's also super cocky and full of hubris too.
True.
So
That's true.
So they approach. Yeah, the property, and they, as you said, they exorcise the dirt. This green mist kind of escapes. He takes out Renfield for kind of ratting him out to Mina, and then this green mist seeps into Seward's quarters where Mina is resting in the bed. The mist kind of comes under the covers up to her. It's very sensual.
Yeah, very erotic.
Yes. And he materializes, and they talk and kiss, and you found me, my love, and she's fully committed to him. At this point.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. Is she's now been in the presence of both loves enough to know what she wants, and she wants Dracula.
And he's still reluctant to turn himself over because he knows what she must become for them to truly be together. He admits he's Dracula. She at first gets mad because she knows that Dracula murdered Lucy. But then she eventually gives in. He bites her, and then he has her drink his blood.
Right.
And she's turned. She is now becoming him.
Right.
The men then burst in, and we get a couple of great little shots here.
Yes.
They burst in, and you see Mina appearing to kind of be making out with no one on the bed. Yeah. And then Dracula in his bat humanoid form just drops down from the ceiling.
Right. And he's just gigantic. The camera angle is, he's towering over these guys.
He backs into a shadow and then turns into a big army of rats to escape.
Right. Yeah, it reminded me a lot. There's an 80s movie called The Gate with the very young Stephen Dorff. Where they play rock music backwards, then it unlocks the gate to hell. But believe it or not, it's actually a great horror movie for kids that can stomach something really scary because it's very kid driven, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a scene in this where they're one of the parents that's supposed it's just there's an adult that's dead that they believe is back to life, and he just turns into these little monsters. And the same kind of thing of it's a humanoid, human shaped, but then just like breaks into these pieces, and it's just, that's what it reminded me of. It was just a really cool shot. Coppola did it better, but the other one was all stop motion, which is still really cool. But yeah, it was just like you said, backs into the shadows. You still see his red eyes, and then when they bring the lantern over, he's just
collapses into dozens of rats. Yeah,
right.
So we're now fully into the third act here, folks.
Yeah, oh yeah, and it's a fast-paced one.
Yes, yeah. Dracula escapes. I'll kind of pick up the pace here a little bit as well with the plot. Van Helsing hypnotizes Mina because she has this psychic connection with Dracula.
Right.
So they're able to kind of pick that he's in the water. So he's back on the boat, sailing back to Transylvania. So they get on a train to try to beat him there. And you get this fun kind of cat and mouse
It's a
game.
race.
Yeah. As he's trying to race back to his castle where he's safest and most deadly. And they're trying to cut him off at ports. We get some more great, like miniature sequences and sets.
Over like map paths, tracing out. And yeah, the guys think, hey, we can go by train and be there in 3 days. It's going to take him a week to get there. Yeah. And so far the plan's flawless until they realize he's shifted because he and Mina have a connection. So everything she knows, he knows. So he's onto it. So he goes land-bound, and his gypsies pick him up, and so it's a race back to the castle. And so they decide Mina's going to go with Van Helsing and as a decoy, and that the guys are all going to be on horseback, and they're going to chase down the gypsy caravan that's got his earth. I almost say his coffin, but he's in a box of earth. And we get the brides again as Van Helsing and Mina take camp. She kind of vamps out a little bit, seduces him, and then the brides attack. Well, Van Helsing snaps out of it enough and circles them protects him in a circle of flames, so the brides just take the horses out.
He protects himself from Mina by shoving a communion wafer into her forehead, so it kind of burns and leaves a scar on her forehead. Again, we're racing back to the castle at this point. The bros and Harker are on horseback. They're chasing after the carriage. They're literally outside the castle. We get a great sequence. Like, it's just like, even like the cinematography here and how they colored everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like these like deep red colors, like the landscape, like the earth, the trees, the sky. It just has this eerie, just kind of like burnt red coloring to everything.
Right.
Some great music playing underneath it, just to kind of add to the urgency of the scene. And
we find out Van Helsing and Mina are actually at Castle Dracula already. So once Dracula gets the vibe that he's kind of losing a little bit, all the gypsies are getting taken out, that they're not holding their own. He telepathically sends to Mina, who then she summons the weather, she's vamped now. So she's summoned all the weather to aid in the approach. She lights the blue flames that we talked about earlier. And then the race ends back at the castle.
Yeah,
it's really like it's not only a race between you've got Dracula racing the bros, but then they're all racing the sunset. So we see that imposed a lot too, spliced in of the time lapse of the sun setting, during all this as well.
So they're in the castle grounds. Harker jumps up on the box that Dracula's in and tries to bust in, but the sun sets, and instead Dracula busts out of the box.
Right.
In a very, very cool little sequence.
Right. It was just this very Jack in the Box like, he pops up, but not before he can get a slice from his neck.
Yeah. Morris stabs Dracula in the chest with a sword. Dracula knocks him away. Morris gets stabbed by one of the gypsies too, so he's hurt. He's bleeding.
I think Quincy was shot, or he was stabbed in the back too. So I mean, there definitely wasn't a lack of casualties on their side either.
Yeah. they're about to try to finish Dracula off, and Mina puts herself between them, between Van Helsing, between the Bros, between Harker and Dracula, and Harker says, "Our work's done."
Yeah.
But hers has just begun.
Right.
So they let her drag him back into the castle, mortally wounded.
Yes.
Quincy Morris then dies.
Yeah.
He succumbs to his wounds from the gypsies and kind of getting knocked around by Dracula. And then Van Helsing says, "We've all become God's madmen." And that's the last we see of the Bros.
Mm-hmm.
And Van Helsing and Harker. So we get to our final sequence here. Inside the castle, we've come full circle. They're back in Dracula's chapel. And Dracula's dying. "Where's my God? He's forsaken me." Mina cries. She kisses him, despite the fact that he's kind of
gross.
Yeah. I literally typed into my notes, "Ew."
Yeah. It's very gross.
Yeah. I mean, I get that she's in love with him, but ew.
Yeah, but yeah, it's gross.
"Our love is stronger than death." A light comes in through the window, lights his face up, back to Gary Oldman's face, and she runs the sword completely through him, chops off his head. She kisses the corpse. Her forehead is healed from the wafer, so she is free of his influence,
which is good.
And then the camera pans up to a stained glass window of Dracula and Elizabeta, and it lights up, and they're together again, assumed in heaven.
Right.
So happy ending? Ish.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, for kind of all pieces involved. I mean, even Dracula, the tortured soul that he was, if he's where he should be, I suppose.
Yeah.
The afterlife, again, because he's been dead, but you know what I mean.
And then credits roll, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Mm-hmm. And that, folks, is Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992, Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah. And it, especially when you look at something like this movie and then Jurassic Park, which came out the next year, this movie doesn't feel like a 90s movie.
No, it has more of a timeless feel to it.
Which is what I'm sure Coppola was intending to do. When he decides to show up, like, the dude's got chops.
Yeah.
The Godfather, especially the first two. The third one it's not awful, but compared to the other two, it's not the same. But you've got the Godfather movies, you've got this, Apocalypse Now. Like, when he decides to show up, I mean, he's essential, and then you've got Jack with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
But and this is one of those where he decided to show up. This wasn't a paycheck movie for him. This was a passion project, and he knocked it out of the park, in my opinion.
Yeah, he did. So, Oz, let's give this movie a rating. Every week, Oz and I rate the movie that we have watched and reviewed with our own unique rating that has no meaning whatsoever.
Nope,
Oz,
not at all.
Oz, how would you rate Bram Stoker's Dracula?
All three brides of Dracula.
All three?
All three of them.
And what a three they are.
If I were a Jonathan Harker, and I'm not, I'm a happily married man, but if I were in the position of Jonathan Harker, I don't know if I'd have been in such a rush to get out of there. It's like, I've got the Three Brides of Dracula or Lydia Dietz. Which one do I want? But that's my rating. How about you?
I'm going to go with, let's say, 87 severed Lucy heads.
Fair enough. So, she did a great job, too. She really did playing into that character.
Yeah. Sadie Frost is the actress who was married to Jude Law for several years.
Oh, didn't know that. Oh, yeah, I did. I just didn't put two and two together.
Yeah. So this brings us to our finale segment, folks, the 3, 2, 1, where Oz and I share our 3 goods, 2 bads, and 1 from the film that we just watched and discussed. Oz, you want to kick things off with your 3 goods?
Yeah, my first good comes very early in the movie. Love that prologue. That prologue opening scene from 400 years ago. Just not only the setting the stage of the story, but the way it was filmed. Mm-hmm. Just the silhouette against the red background in the battle. Just the sheer romance of all of it. even the very obvious but yet underlying religious tones to it. Just the whole prologue, it was quick, it was beautiful, and it made sense, like going into the story, how he became who he is. I love that prologue. My second one, and this is from a film lover standpoint, is the blending of the quality of the effects. So many of the effects in this movie are just so wonderfully done. The rear projection of Dracula's shadows, the physical transformations, whether it be the werewolf form or the old man form or the bat form or whatever, so clearly the budget and technical know-how of the effects was there, which made me really love the choice of the low budget effects, the superimposed eyes over the sky, the editing choice of and it happened on more than one occasion, of the zooming in on a circular object to then transition into another circular object, whether it be the eye of a peacock feather into the exit of the train, or the sun, so just though reversing the playback of the film, and so because there was the technical know-how of the better effect shots, I really appreciated the just kind of the really age-old, golden age of Hollywood choice, because back then they didn't have the practical effects ability. And so they really had to do a lot of camera trickery and film work. And Coppola did both of those in this film. And I loved it. I loved all of it. Like I said, especially, Harker's in the carriage and you see Dracula's eyes over the landscape. And it's that's so easy to do. But because it's so easy to do, nobody does it anymore. There's always this trying to escalate what we can do with our effects budget, that sometimes the subtlety and the easy approach is more effective. And my third one is just kind of piggyback on it, the editing. This film has a style, and that style is created because Coppola had a vision for what he wanted, and between him filming it and it being edited in the way he wanted it, it's what brought it all together. If either one of those pieces doesn't work, the movie doesn't have as much of a stylistic feel. So it just gives, with him being the producer and the director, you could tell that he had his hands in every piece of this, and it really was his movie. You easily could have called this Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, and it would have been just as effective. How about you?
Well, again,
what are your three?
Well, again, the aggressiveness and boldness, just kind of finishing that thought there. Those are the styles, and I know some people knock this movie for that, but again, he dives in reckless abandon, and I think for us it works.
Yeah, and just to quick aside, this movie works for me the same way that Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet works. It's, he told the story the way he wanted to tell it, and you either take it or you leave it. But I don't think anybody can, even if you don't like this movie, I don't think you can deny that it's a bad movie. Yeah. It just didn't work for you. I mean, I don't think anybody could watch this and be like, oh, the effects are awful or the acting is awful. And so, that's what it is for me. How about you?
So my three goods, we have those first-person shots when he's kind of a predator towards the other characters. Whether he's in kind of the wolf hybrid form or the bat hybrid form, but just those predator sequences that it just show what he is and who he is and how he perceives the world, and just how eerie it is. I won't get into the technical parts of it like you shared earlier, but it lends itself to his character and just what he is. My second good is the bros. I love the just this genuine sense of camaraderie that these three have. They very much could be rivals for the affection of Lucy, and eventually, she chose Homewood, but Morris and Seward stuck around. Right. I would think just as much for her as it was for the others. They enjoyed being together. They helped each other out. They mourned the loss when one of them died. It was a cool kind of brotherhood that they formed together.
Yeah.
And then the last one, kind of on the other side of the end from your prologue, I'd say the last 20 minutes, like the conclusion of the third act, the pacing, it ramps up, and you're literally and figuratively along for the ride for the last 20 minutes, when the cat and mouse back and forth, they're tracking them from London to Transylvania, the sequence riding up to the castle once they get there. But it's just what a finish to this movie.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah. So, Oz, what are your two bads? What were two things about Bram Stoker's Dracula that maybe, I don't know, didn't sit well?
Keanu Reeves' performance. He's a fine actor. Even at this stage of his career in the early 90s, he was a fine actor. I mean, he's getting roles. He's a handsome enough guy. By this point, we've had Bill and Ted. He was in Parenthood with Steve Martin. He played a lesser role there, but he was there. So he's been around. But it's just such a wooden performance. Not a lot of depth, and really, I think a lot of it's because Hollywood hasn't yet found the right roles for him. He excels in John Wick, but it's such a physical role. There's not a lot of acting depth to it.
Yeah.
I thought he was great in Speed, but the same thing, just not a lot of depth to the character. We need you to be an action hero. But this required him to act a little more than I think he was ready for. And he was fine. He served his place in the plot, and I get why he was there. He didn't destroy any part of the movie for me.
Yeah.
But he didn't bring anything extra to that role either. So luckily, though, everything that he lacked in his acting, Anthony Hopkins brought it plus. So it all evened out at the end. Yeah. And my second one is it's 2 hours and 7 minute runtime, and unlike last week where the pacing was all over the place and just wrong for History of the World Part 1, there were parts of this movie that felt very long for the runtime. And it isn't that any scenes weren't necessary, but just how they were shot, sometimes the pause between lines for dramatic effect. I'm not saying, shortening things up would have saved a ton of runtime. But like I told you, I fell asleep 45 minutes into it last night, not willingly. I was on board. I'm watching this, and I just dozed off because there were some parts that just, even Lucy's storyline, integral to the plot, but it was a long drawn out piece that, yes, we found the golden threads of, we got the bromance out of it, introduction of Van Helsing, but it just, it was just, there were parts of it that just felt very long, and they were probably deliberate. Apocalypse Now is not a short movie. The Godfather movies certainly are not short movies. But I was surprised to see that this movie is only 2 hours and 7 minutes long.
Yeah.
It felt longer at times. So those are my two. How about you?
Sure. My two bads, one you just kind of mentioned a little bit, and that was Anthony Hopkins overacting. I get, the Van Helsing character is supposed to be very big and bold and arrogant and confident, but I think almost leaned into it too much.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was distracting to me how much he was kind of chewing the scenes and almost took away from the other actors' performances.
Especially if they were there. When I would say, his biggest was when he beheaded the three brides and tossed their heads off the bridge. It was just him there. So when he's yelling to the gods or whatever, okay, but there was no one to overshadow in that scene. But you're right. When he's there with anybody else in the scene, it's the Anthony Hopkins show.
Mm-hmm. And my other bad, it's a nice little segue you gave me there. There's not really, you could argue there's no hero in this movie. Not that it needs one, so I'm being a little nitpicky here, but there's the three bros, but they're not main characters. Harker's just a weenie.
Yeah.
A clueless weenie. And Van Helsing, I would argue he's not a good guy. There's a lot of parallels between his character and Dracula. He in a lot of ways is just as much a predator as Dracula is. And that scene you just mentioned where he beheads the three brides and he's holding them up by their hair and there's just blood all over him. He doesn't care. Like he enjoyed what he just did.
Right.
And
I think you go ahead.
It's not that it didn't have to be done, but again, he took a lot of pleasure in that act.
You just wonder if that was part of Coppola's intention when he cast him as the religious figure in the prologue as well. That even though they're obviously not the same, he's not playing the same character that Gary Oldman was playing, but that in some ways their characters have a lot more in common, than we take for. And so seeing Hopkins physically in two places in the same movie, despite it being two characters, there could just be this kind of, I wonder if anybody's going to pick up on the fact that he's just as evil as Dracula, only without the romantic intention.
All right, those are my bads. What's your one?
My this week is more of a wow. We had touched on it a couple different times, but with the exception of the blue flame rings emanating just outside of Dracula's castle, every other effect in this film was done on set or in camera or in editing or whatever. Nothing was added digitally except for those blue flame rings. Everything else was done there, which is really impressive when you consider that when you look at Coppola's filmography, this probably is, I haven't seen all of his films, but this is probably the most effects-laden movie that he's done. And so he's not a director that's known for the effects in his movies. But man, there were great effects in this movies. And the challenge that he put forth, if they're all going to be practical. Like, I don't want to include anything else in post that I don't have to. And those blue flame rings, and when you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, you're not going to have a carriage drive through flames. And it would be impossible to get those flame rings to do that anyway that I know of. I'm not a scientist by any means, but that's more like a wow. Like, that was really impressive that everything was done physically, on set or in camera. How about you?
My is, why was Van Helsing so hungry?
And why was it always like blood led too?
And it's like they just got done treating Lucy. And they know that Dracula's like out there hunting for her, and he's like, you know what, Seward, let's go get something to eat. I'm hungry.
Right? Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
and then
go ahead.
And then later on, it's like him and was it Harker and Mina, and he's got this big old piece of bloody meat in front of him, and he's just nom 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 nom.
And he had just the scene before beheaded Lucy.
Yeah.
And it's like so, it just raises too that. He's a doctor with no moral compass. I mean, you've got, your supposedly, your vision in medical science is, you help the patient, treat the patient, save the patient, etc. But for him,
my belly's empty.
Yeah, he's got no qualms in any action that he does. He does try to save Lucy. Like, I'm not saying he's not trying to help, but he's quick. He would have no problem with talking patients into a DNR. like I'm going to try it, but you're probably not coming out of this. So,
and I'm probably going to be hungry later. So
right. But yeah, I can see that. Like he's a hungry dude.
All right. Well, that was Bram Stoker's Dracula. You want to take us out, give the viewers, let them know where we are.
Yeah, so, kicking off the first week of February here, you're going to see, 3 more romance movies come out of it. Of course, you know what to do at this point. Like, subscribe, comment, review, all those things. You can find us on social media. We'll share all the links below in the description as well. If you're watching on YouTube, otherwise you'll catch us on whatever podcast or Facebook you find us on. Tell your friends. We would love to have more listeners and viewers if possible. I'm sure it's possible. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and I don't think we're hitting 20 likes or views yet. So I think it's possible to have more people enjoy it. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. we're a few months into this, so I think we know what we're doing. We found our flow. We like what we're doing. We hope you like it too. Next week, you need to come back because we are going a different direction with romance. We're going more of your stereotypical romances. We're going to be covering, I think it's 92 as well.
Same year. Yeah, two romance movies from the same year.
We're covering the
92, the year of love.
The year of love. So month of February, it's a year of Februaries. We're covering the Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston classic, The Bodyguard. A movie which I watched for the first time prior to taking notes for the podcast. I had not seen it before. Jenny and I watched it, and I enjoyed it. I did. I didn't mind it. Killer soundtrack. I think the soundtrack has definitely stood the test of time longer than the movie has, but it definitely was a feather in the cap of a Mr. Kevin Costner as he's worked his way into superstar status of that era. So that's what we're covering next week. If Bram Stoker's Dracula was not for you in the romance department, there's a really good chance that The Bodyguard will be. So make sure you come and join us for that one next week. You got anything to send us off with?
No, just looking forward to next week and this month. Yeah.
So sounds good. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. Hopefully you guys check out with us each week, and we will catch you next week as well. I'm saying week a lot, but that's okay. For Let's Talk About Flicks, I'm Oz.
I'm Curtis.
And we will catch you next week. There's one more. I want to make sure I got one in. All right. Thanks, guys.